In this episode, we are making baked garlic Parmesan wings that are absolutely phenomenal. These wings are crispy, golden, and loaded with flavor, but without the deep fryer. After baking them, we're gonna toss them in a rich garlic butter sauce and finish them with freshly shaved Parmesan cheese. Plus, I'm sharing how I like to make wings crispy in the oven after all of my wing experiments. These wings are truly irresistible. You won't wanna miss this one. For the full ingredient list, check the description box below, but enough talking, let's get cooking. The first thing we gotta do is trim up our wings. You could start off with already trimmed wingettes, but when you start with the whole wing, you get these fabulous wing tips that we can make a bone broth of, and it's way cheaper to buy a whole wing than wings that are already trimmed. To trim the wing, we make one cut right in between the flat and the drumstick. I'm gonna pop the bone out, and then once I get in between, I'll put my knife right in between. I'll get my drumstick and I'll do the same thing in between the wing tip and the flat. So we'll end with a drumstick, a wingtip, and a flat. The wingtips I like to keep inside the freezer, so I have this running container. Actually, I have a bunch of these containers in the freezer. So I keep these running containers of wingtips, and I'll just throw these right in there. And then once I get a few containers filled, I'll make some bone broth. I'm also gonna take our bowl that we're gonna put the wings in, and while I'm trimming them up, I'm gonna put this piece of paper towel on the bottom. That's gonna help absorb any moisture that's gonna collect as I'm throwing these wingtips in there, because the drier the wings are when we start, the crispier they're gonna get. And when you're doing something like this, you're trying to get into a good rhythm of cutting, popping, and slicing, and finding the middle of those joints. Wings, wingtip. I see so many videos of people trimming wings where they're just like hacking through the bone. Take the extra time to just cut into the joint, pop the joint apart, find the separation in between the bones. It takes a minute or two, but once you get the hang of it, and then you see how awesome these wingtips are, you would never buy wingettes ever again. Now I'm gonna take these wingtips and throw these in the freezer. Once I get this all filled up, I already got a couple in the freezer. We're gonna make some bone broth. And these are one of the best cuts of chicken to make bone broth, because you can't really eat them. There's not much meat on them, but they're super high in collagen, super flavorful. Excellent, excellent, excellent for making bone broth, and they store it really easy in the freezer. So in my quest to find how to get wings crispy in the oven, I have found that a combination of these three things are currently the best additives that we can put on the wings to make them crispy while baking them. So first up is gonna be some baking powder. This is some just regular baking powder. This is the Rumford brand. I like that it doesn't have any aluminum in it. A lot of baking powders do, this one does not. Next up is gonna be some white rice flour. So rice flour, it's a little gritty in texture, so when it bakes in the oven, it gives a nice crunchiness. And thirdly, but not lastly, is gonna be this potato starch. Potato starch is fluffy, and so it adds a nice airy crispiness. So these two plus this one, and all three all together, really make super crispy wings in the oven. If you have any other tips on things that you add to your wings to make them crispy while baking them, throw those in the comment section. I always like to make videos of people suggesting what are other things that make wings crispy in the oven. So now let's take about a tablespoon of each one of these and sprinkle it right on top of the wings. So first up, the baking powder. Next, some of this white rice flour. Last but not least, the potato starch. Now to season these wings, we're gonna start off with some of my base seasoning. This is a blend of garlic powder, onion powder, salt, and pepper. Next up is gonna be some smoked paprika. And now spice alert, this is Kinder's black garlic and truffle seasoning. It says steak seasoning on it, but I find that this is an awesome multi-purpose seasoning and is unbelievable for seasoning wings, backed up with the base seasoning and some smoked paprika. I've also found something that helps them get crispy in the oven is adding some olive oil to this dry spice and like crispiness mixture. Adding a couple tablespoons of olive oil mixed in there will really help get it nice and crispy in the oven as it's cooking. So now I'm just gonna get in there with my hands and make sure that everything is evenly coated with the spices, the oil, and the crispy mixtures. Oh, I forgot that I had the paper towel in there. Good thing we took that out. And even though we put all that white powder in there, once it gets onto the wings and starts to absorb all the moisture from the outside of the wings and the oil that we added in there, it disappears and just turns into like a nice coating on the outside of the wings, and that's what gets crispy in addition to the skin. So we're gonna use this extra large baking tray with the wire raised grate on it. I like to line it with aluminum foil and parchment paper to save on cleanup. The parchment paper also helps absorb some of the fat that renders out of the chicken so it doesn't smoke. So I found that this is a great setup that not only is functional, it makes it super easy to clean up. We don't have to scrub a dirty burnt on sheet pan. So before I put the wings on there, I'm gonna give this a light spray with some oil, and this I'm using avocado oil, but you can use any spray oil, but I wanna cover the grate because one of the worst parts about baking chicken wings is as you flip them, they stick to the grate. So if we can oil the grate now and plus a couple other steps later, it'll really reduce the amount of sticking. Then we won't get skin that's pulled off the chicken wings as we're flipping them. So I'm gonna take this spray oil and I'm gonna give it a quick cover on the grate and really make sure I'm getting the edges. I find that that's where a lot of sticking tends to happen. The larger the sheet, the more area we have to cover with the wings so we can spread them out. So we're gonna spread out the wings nice and evenly across the baking sheet. And I like to start with the flat side, like that presentation side up. The drumsticks really don't have a presentation side, so you can go either way. Just make sure that the skin is pulled up nice and tight. So now I'm gonna arrange these with some space in between on this baking tray. And once you get them all on there, you can see if you got to rearrange it, but I'm always making sure that the skin is up and there's space in between. If you overcrowd the baking tray, then you're going to have a lot of problems with steaming the chicken wings instead of them getting crispy. We've already preheated our oven to 425 and I have the convection setting on. You can do this recipe in an air fryer, but if you use a regular oven and you don't have a convection setting, it's not going to get as crispy. And that's probably one of the most common questions is, you know, if I do this in a regular oven, don't have a convection setting, what do I do? Well, just know that it's not going to get as crispy and probably a little bit more flipping. And you might want to use a slightly higher temperature. So we got a couple more wings on here. Let's see if we can make some room. Hey, and everybody made it to the party. So now with that same avocado oil, I'm going to give these a light spray on the top. These are gonna go in our preheated oven at 425 with the convection setting on for about 20 or 25 minutes before the first flip. If you're doing this in the air fryer, you can use similar temperatures, maybe a little bit less. And like I said, if you're using your regular oven, maybe you wanna give it a little bit more, but probably flip it way more often. So for our garlic butter, we only gotta prep 2 things. We're gonna mince up about 10 cloves of garlic. I'm going a little overboard on the garlic because I really like the whole garlic part of the garlic parm wings, but maybe you don't wanna be so garlicky, you could tone it down a little bit, but I'm going 10. And some fresh chopped parsley. And you can use dried parsley and pre-minced garlic, but fresh is always gonna be best. So for our garlic, we're gonna trim off the root end of the garlic. We're gonna crush each clove. And now using our rocker chopper motion, we're gonna put a fine mince on this garlic. If I just keep running our knife back and forth over the garlic, as the pile spreads out, we will push it together. But if you can't mince garlic, I mean, that's one of the essential cooking things that you got to do for us to be friends. So get your garlic mincing on, stop buying the stuff in the jar, unless you really want to and you don't really care, then you do you. But there's not much to this recipe, and anytime there's not much to a recipe, every single ingredient, the quality becomes way more important. So in our garlic parm wings, I mean, the garlic's kind of important, and fresh rocks. Just try to take your time and put a nice fine mince on it because you don't want giant garlic chunks. You want to get it about as fine as the stuff in the jar. And the more finely you chop the garlic, the more intense the garlic flavor. And I don't know about you, but I love garlic. That's about as fine as we're going to need to mince that. Now with this parsley, let's pull the leaves off and get rid of the stems. Don't be putting parsley stems in your food. It's kind of gross. People tell me that they do that and they just chop it up with the stems. I have never, ever seen a refined dish with parsley stems. I feel like this is an essential step. And it's so easy, just 3 fingers and pull. Put your 3 fingers around the leaf and pull. If you get any stems in there, just pull them out. And on the same motion, we mince that garlic, rocker chopper, all the way through. Got this small sauce pot heating over a medium to medium low heat. We're gonna add a little bit of olive oil, a half a stick of some butter. The olive oil is gonna help the butter melt and cook without burning it. So while that's melting, we're gonna go ahead and throw in our minced garlic. I'm gonna stir the garlic in there. And as the garlic cooks and starts to saute, it's gonna release an unbelievable smell. I love the aroma of cooked garlic, especially with the butter and the olive oil. Oh my God, this smells so good. We're gonna let this simmer for maybe a minute or 2 until the garlic becomes fragrant. Make sure that your heat is low enough that you're not gonna burn the garlic, but you're just cooking it to mellow out the sharpness of the flavor and release the flavor into the butter and the oil. After about a minute or 2, I'm gonna add some fresh ground black pepper and some salt. And if you're using a salted butter, you can already skip that step, but I always use unsalted butter and add my salt later. After that's had a minute or 2 to cook, we're gonna add a nice heavy pinch of the parsley. And we'll mix that in. The parsley doesn't really need to cook, so we're gonna shut this off and let it cool down, but we're also gonna try to keep it warm. So I like to keep this just on the stove. Just the heat from the oven will keep it melted enough that it's not gonna cook, but it's gonna keep the butter from solidifying while our wings are cooking. So these have been in the oven for about 25 minutes. You can hear how crackly and crispy these things are getting. They are far from done, but you can already see that they're getting really nice and crispy on the outside. Like I said previously, one of the biggest problems is having these stick while we're flipping them. So the thing that I found that reduces that the most, doesn't go to 0, but it definitely reduces it, is spraying it with a little bit of oil on the top before you flip them. Because the chicken fat's gonna render down, so the bottom is good and it's gonna get crispy. But what I'm gonna do is just give it a light spray with oil on the top of each wing so that I'm putting an oiled side of the wing down on the baking grate when I flip them. And so with each one of these, I'm gonna take the side that was down and I'm gonna flip it over so that the underside is on the top. So now he's gonna go back in the oven for about another 20 minutes. As you can see, these wings are looking mighty crispy, so we're gonna do the same exact thing. Light spray of oil and then give them a flip so these can finish for about 10 more minutes. And if any of these wings give you problems sticking, make sure that you just take your time. I think the faster you do it, the more likely you are to damage the skin. But if you just kind of caress them a little bit and pull it up nice and slowly and work both sides, you can flip even the stickiest ones without too much damage. But usually every time I say that, I'm bound to get a nice blowout in one soon. So stay tuned, let's see. So these are gonna go back in the oven for about 5 to 10 minutes until we get our final crisp. And for all the haters out there, we did this under an hour. One of the biggest criticisms of baking wings versus frying them is it takes much longer. I don't make the rules to get the skin crispy and for the wing to cook all the way through. It takes about an hour, but a lot of the time is hands off, so you can be doing other things in the kitchen while those wings are cooking. Not to mention, you don't have to get rid of a giant pot of hot oil after deep frying. These wings look absolutely unbelievable. Super crispy. These wings are all done and look how crispy they look. They were just baked, but they look like they were just taken out of the fryer. I mean, these things are super hot, but if we can inspect one, I mean, this is so crispy looking. The outside of this looks unreal. This is gonna be perfect to throw on that garlic butter because the garlic butter is gonna have lots of nooks and crannies of this crispy texture of this chicken wing to cling to. So before we sauce these up, we're gonna give them about 5 minutes to cool down, and as they're cooling down, they'll get even more crispy. So while these are cooling down, let's check out what these wings look like. I mean, look how crispy this thing looks. And it's gonna get even crispier as it cools down. But even if it's not that crispy, listen to what this sounds like when I run my knife over it. I mean, that sounds like I'm dragging my knife on concrete. It's so crispy and amazing. Can't believe it was baked. They look like they were just taken right out of the fryer. So let's let these finish cooling, and then we'll dress them with our garlic butter and the Parmesan cheese. So now that these have had a chance to cool, they are cool to the touch and extra, extra crispy. Listen to that knife test again. Super crispy. So let's take these, we're gonna throw them inside the bowl, and we're gonna toss them with our garlic butter. I mean, listen what it sounds like when I'm throwing them in the bowl. It sounds like I'm throwing rocks in there. And you can see all that sticking has completely stopped now that they are fully cooked and cooled. The only thing that sucks is we got to clean these raised grates, but they're going to clean up much easier than this baking tray. All I got to do is pick up the aluminum foil and parchment paper, and we're all done. Look at that, good as new. So now let's give our garlic butter a nice mix. I'm going to spoon this over so we get nice even coating of everything all around. But I like to just throw it all around so we don't get some that have a lot and some that have none. And if this looks like an obscene amount of garlic, that's exactly what I was aiming for. Let's give these a nice toss. So now let's take our wings and put them on our serving tray. And then we're gonna take any of that extra garlic and butter and spread that out over the top of these. The little garlic bits are some of my favorite. Right now we just have garlic wings, so let's add the parm. We're gonna shred on this Parmigiano Reggiano right on the top. You can use the pre-shredded stuff, but fresh is always gonna be best, just like the garlic and the parsley. And now make sure that you're getting every single wing, nice amount of this Parmesan cheese right on top. These wings look out of control. And to finish, we're just gonna take some more of that fresh parsley and sprinkle it right on top. Now, how amazing do these wings look? My mouth is watering. I can't wait to try them. Let's take a look at one of these wings and look how amazing this looks. Super crispy, fluffy on the outside. That's that mixture of the rice flour and the potato starch, plus the baking powder. And the garlic parm combo smells so good. Fresh Parmesan cheese, fresh garlic butter. I can't wait to try this. But enough talking about it. Let's see how we did. This tastes so good. Move over Buffalo Wild Wings. Your garlic parm is trash compared to this. This is so good. This wing is so crispy, so flavorful. And the fresh garlic, the fresh parm really, really matters. I mean, you could use the minced stuff and the Parmesan cheese in the tube, but it ain't gonna taste like this. These wings are juicy, flavorful. And if you think I went overboard on the garlic, don't come over to my house for dinner. I'm gonna eat a bunch more of these wings while I'm doing that. Check out my baked broccoli with a crispy cheese crust. That is also a really nice app to throw out for game day. I'll see you there. Thanks.